In a world gone mad, only rationality and common sense can save it. It's Andrew and Jerry Save the World with your hosts, Andrew Langer and Jerry Rogers. And now, here's Andrew and Jerry.
Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Andrew and Jerry Save the World, episode 61. Andrew and Jerry say it stinks less. I'm Andrew Langer.
I'm Jerry Rogers. You say 61, and
Yeah.
I think of the M&M boys, Mickey Mantle and Roger
Yes.
Maris. 61 home runs in 1961.
Here
we go. This is our big year, right? This is our big show right here. 61.
It's a milestone show, and as we hit our milestone in terms of downloads,
Yes.
by the way, Jerry and I even had a conversation about this. You may wind up starting to hear some ads on Andrew and Jerry Save the World. I'm working on that right now. But of course, by talking about what stinks less, we're referring to the debt ceiling compromise that has apparently been reached between the White House and Republicans in the House, led by Kevin McCarthy, now wending its way through the House. And Jerry and I both are of the same opinion that if everybody dislikes it, then maybe there's something to be said here. But I want to get your thoughts on this, Jerry.
Well, it's interesting, right? I mean, if you look at the coverage, and I have, because we're linking and writing about it over at Real Clear Politics. The American Prospect, left of center journal, doesn't like it. Vox, left of center, doesn't like it. The Nation doesn't like it. The American Prospect, a little more realistic. They had a piece today that said you go to war with the president that you have. In other words, this is it. This is what we got. Right. Now on the right, the same thing. You have Reason doesn't like it. You have Jim Bovard, who's a really good writer, thinker, writing in the New York Post saying that someone please send in the rewrite. But then you have Steve Moore. And we like Steve Moore, and Steve Moore says, "Look, this is more good than not." Right. And then you have some on the left who say, "Look, on the work requirements on some of these welfare programs, on protecting against going back to baseline budgeting, the left won." So your point is 100% correct. If everyone hates it, if everyone dislikes it, then it's probably okay until we hit the real season for debate and compromise, which is of course September, and that's the budget process.
Right. And I'll say this much about this. The reality is, from a purely political perspective, the fact that we got the president to the table and to compromise things, and we're not raising taxes. Listen, these are small victories to be had, but
Kevin McCarthy won.
Ultimately
Kevin McCarthy, because every single day, and again, to his credit, but also something you and I have advised, get to the cameras, get to the media every single day. Right. Do you know that over the last, I want to say 3 weeks, maybe longer, he's had the press conference every day. Right. And where was Joe Biden? He was in Delaware. He was at Camp David. He was overseas. He was in Japan. And again, the Democrats were upset with the president because he lost the narrative.
And keeping in mind that there was at least the framework of an agreement before the House passed their bill. The president turned around and tried to renege on this. What the Democrats wanted to do was they wanted to throw Republicans off their game, and either to get the government to shut down or to agree to a tax increase. And somebody, I think, finally took a look at what folks were saying in the opinion polls and realized, something, the Democrats may have actually lost the narrative on this.
They did. They lost the narrative, and the polling showed that.
Yeah, and
again, that for someone like me, who's usually a curmudgeon when it comes to politics and policy, the fact that you could have the entire media establishment, except for right of center, conservative media, really just go into combat against the Republicans, the GOP, and Kevin McCarthy. And even still, the public opinion was like 60% of those who were paying attention believed there had to be some spending cuts in the debt ceiling compromise.
Right.
Here's the bottom line for me. And this is my problem with the Freedom Caucus. And I support the Freedom Caucus. I like Chip Roy, Congressman Roy. I like these libertarian-leaning conservatives. But the fact of the matter is, it is dishonest to believe that the debt ceiling compromise or deal was going to fix Washington, D.C.
Right.
It never was going to fix D.C. This is again, kick the can Band-Aid, but it's a kick the can Band-Aid that is less, to use your word, less stinky.
Less stinky. Jerry doesn't like the word stinky. It stinks less.
But it stinks a little less.
Stinks less. And that's what it comes down to. Jerry and I both recognize that what we're talking about here is raising the credit limit on my family credit card and agreeing to not go into debt a little less over time. And we know that's a bad thing. Listen, we're not denying that, but there is no reality right now unless everybody in Washington were replaced, both Democrats and Republicans, frankly, that this is not going to change somehow. And so this is where we're going. So in the end, in order to sort of live to fight another day, and as Jerry correctly points out, focus on the appropriations bills and the budget process down the road.
And Republicans control the committee chairs.
Again, it comes back to focusing on the fundamentals, which is that between now and November of 2024, Republicans have got to field a good presidential candidate, someone who has coattails, who can deliver an increase in the number of Republican seats in the House and an increase in the Republican seats in the Senate, so the Republicans can control the Senate, so that maybe, just maybe, we can start to get stuff done. The other part, Jerry, hold on for a second. The other part of this, and this is something that isn't really reported, right? Because Republicans get the constant blame for not being willing to compromise on things. But let's again go back to the
ironically, because the Republicans end up compromising on everything,
right? And pre-negotiate against themselves, by the way, which is a whole problem. But let's remember that there were opportunities back when Republicans held both houses of Congress during the Trump administration. There were opportunities to go across party lines and solve some of the thorny issues that America is facing, whether or not it's infrastructure or immigration or a host of other things. Sure. And Democrats refused to come to the table and negotiate in good faith on those things.
This is a good point. I had three things top of mind. Number one is
three things you need to know, Jerry.
Three things you need to know about the debt ceiling. Number one, Republicans control the gavel, all the gavels in the House. So therefore, going back to regular order, and we've been consistent on this, the Andrew and Jerry show, we have been consistent. The most conservative, the most market-based, the most reform-minded thing to do in the House is simply go back to regular order, have hearings, bring up witnesses, and pass these appropriation bills. We can do that. Republicans can do that in September, number one. Number two, and Mark Thiessen said this, so I don't take credit for it, but Mark Thiessen, from AEI, also the Washington Post, but you ginned off it already, and that is, he said, look, there is some hypocrisy with the right, with these Republicans and their supporters, both in the grifter class, but also in the punditry and the think tank community, and that is, Republicans did have full control of the government for 2 years, 2017, 2018, right? And I understand that the Democrats can pull mischief, and they did pull mischief. Famously or infamously, Nancy Pelosi said that Republicans are evil, sinful, immoral on the border, and therefore no Democrat, including in the Senate where you have the filibuster, no Democrat's going to compromise on the border issue. So there were some issues that, because it was Trump, because it was controversial, they weren't going to get a solution or compromise. However, on spending, Republicans and Donald Trump broke the bank. And there's the real hypocrisy. They really did break the bank. I'm not talking about the tax cuts.
Yeah.
Everyone who says the tax cuts have ballooned the deficit and therefore the debt, they're all wrong. That is not true. In fact, you look at the federal income, the tax revenue coming in, we're at all-time highs. So we do not have we don't have a revenue problem in the government. We have a spending problem. But this last thing is that again, to gin off what you said and what Mark Thiessen wrote about is Republicans moving forward. Like if the Freedom Caucus, which is, threatening that there will be a reckoning with McCarthy over this debt deal. If this is who you are, then be who you are consistently.
Yes.
So if DeSantis is president in 2024 and 4 years, the 4 years after that, then let's see some discipline in the House, in the Senate, and Republicans need to rein in the deficit and rein in the debt. That's it.
Yeah. Remember what we've long said, both here and when I was on BAL and others, that a politician is someone who can hold and espouse two diametrically opposed views simultaneously. And I firmly believe that. I mean, this is an age-old issue in terms of what happens in Congress. People get it. This is where I was going to go. So I'm searching for this. Remember that before Donald Trump was elected president, we've been down this road way too many times. Jerry and I wrote a piece, literally right before the election, on how if you were really concerned about reining in executive branch power, especially if Donald Trump gets elected, then when Donald Trump gets elected, both Democrats and never Trump Republicans should turn around and take steps to limit executive branch power. But neither side was willing to do that because both sides want, I'm sorry, I say that with very few exceptions. But there is a core of people on both sides of the aisle, especially on the left, who don't want to see any measure of executive branch power lessened. They like that. They like to wield it when they're
and they like power in the
yes.
the imperial presidency. And again, it's funny. It was the Democrats back in the 80s, right, when we were coming of political age. We were teenagers,
right, and
then college in the 90s. But I remember the left used to call the Reagan administration the imperial presidency.
Right. Yes.
And now, and think about how the power of the executive has grown even since Reagan.
By leaps and bounds. I want to get into something, and then in a second, I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege on that. I'm reminded, Jerry, and I'm sure you witnessed this as well. Walking down the streets of Washington D.C. with our former boss, Fred Smith from CEI. And a presidential motorcade would pass by, and Fred would angrily shake his fist and yell,
"Boo!
This is not an imperial president."
Yes, he would boo and hiss and yell that. Yes.
On that token, real quick, I am working on. Jerry knows this. I'm going to explain this to you. I am working on a set of comments to the Office of Management and Budget. They are in the process of revising the guidelines that they use to assess the costs and benefits of regulation. It's the first time that these processes will have been revised since 2003. And they are trying to inculcate things like ESG and DEI. They're not calling it that. They're couching it in other terms, but essentially they want to change the metrics by which we measure the benefits. They want to vastly overstate the benefits of regulation.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I want to comment on this because again, all my good ideas, I, of course, steal from other sources. But the Foundation for Economic Education had a great piece that really caused me to think about ESG differently. He said that the question was, do you know why Target commits market suicide with its pride, over the top pride display? There's one thing to have a pride display,
right?
There's another thing to do what Target did with the Satan knows your pronouns and these other over the top, really offensive statements and displays. But
by the way, I have no doubt that Satan knows your pronouns.
But my point is that my problem is not with a pride display in the marketplace. My problem is when it's purposefully offensive to those who think differently.
Yes,
it goes against the idea of pluralism. It really does.
Can we come back to this, because I want to talk? We want to talk about this in the context of what's happening with the LA Dodgers.
Yes, of course. But let me just mention this about ESG. So this piece over at FEE, the reason why these companies target Bud Light, Miller Lite, we know who they are, is not so much because they think they'll gain market. They know they're going to lose money, They do it to satisfy their ESG overlords.
Got it.
They could point to these type of market, they could do a marketing thing for a month and then end it, or they can do a 3-week.
It would be one thing, Jerry, if it was just the one thing and they end it, but it's not, right? It just keeps going. I mean, I agree with that to an extent, but I know from someone who
it caused me to think differently. I'm not sure if it's right or wrong, but it did cause me to think.
Listen, I just say from my perspective on this, having had conversations, I think I've talked about this on the air. I have a really good friend known for years who was in big time PR. Like, we're talking about one of the big PR firms in the country advising Fortune 500 clients. And this person was telling me about how you get these Gen Z kids who come into these PR firms and they think they know everything, and they start advising these Fortune 500 companies, and they give them just absolutely terrible advice that has no relationship to what's happening in the real world.
I don't want to go down this branch, but we talked about that just to confirm. We should just have a show that we just confirm how right we are. I do that at the Jerry Rogers show.
That's the essence of our show. The world after
I have a Jerry's Just Right segment at WBAL that is really a lot of fun. But part of the problem with Gen Z, part of the problem with younger millennials, is that they haven't been taught history,
right?
And so therefore, they have no real depth or knowledge, and they make these silly mistakes that cost a company billions of dollars.
Or they've been taught a disrespect for history.
Right. Yes, of course.
Learn nothing from history because it's all right. Yeah. I mean, listen, I sat down with a host named Scott Hook on Memorial Day, and we spent a lot of time. It's the Right Hook show with Scott. Anyway, it was good stuff. But hold on. Let me just finish this point about OMB. The point is that this is essentially, the OMB is creating a license to commit major regulatory larceny, and nobody knows about it.
And they'll get away with it.
And they'll get away with it. And the problem, of course, is that it will then it will take another administration coming in and engaging in the revisions to this, and it's a whole process that has to be gone through. And I listen, I was surprised when the Trump administration focused on regulation. I'm sure if the Republican comes in next, they will. But the problem, of course, is if the Republican loses in 2024, we will have 5 years of massive regulatory growth. I have projected that regulations will cost the American economy $7 trillion by 2030.
And again, just to emphasize this point, the regulatory burden and the wealth theft, and I'm not talking about the Elon Musk. I'm talking about the Main Street mom and pop shops,
right?
That will never happen because of regulatory overreach, or companies that want to reinvest in American manufacturing, in jobs or wages in America.
Let me bring
These things won't happen.
The basic Gilbert Gottfried example, which is the pizza store, because Gilbert Gottfried can never use the phrase pizzeria for whatever reason. You have a pizza store, and all of a sudden the EPA comes down and says you can no longer have either a coal-fired or a gas-fired pizza oven. You have to put an electricity-fired oven.
That's ridiculous. They'll never come after your gas stove.
They will never do that. But the point is that we measure costs in terms of the direct regulatory cost and how much it's going to cost them to do this. That impacts jobs, that impacts reinvestment, that impacts.
Look, in the state of Maryland, right? From where I'm broadcasting, you can't get a decent bagel, egg, and cheese sandwich.
Yes.
Why? Because in these bagel shops in New Jersey, there's a reason why.
Oh, this is a great story.
There's a reason why the bagel sandwiches are so good. Yes, the water, the bagels, the bread, I get all that. But also, if you order a sandwich, they fry it right there in front of you. There's a griddle. There's a griddle, right?
Yes.
And however, in Maryland, because of regulations, if you want to have a griddle, if you want to have a hot plate, you have to train and license every worker, which comes to $7,000 per worker.
Right.
Well, if you're a bagel shop, you've been to a bagel shop on a Sunday morning,
right?
You got 10 kids working.
Yes.
And right, you have 10 people working.
Yes.
So 10 times 7 is $70,000,
and that's for one regulation, right? This is the
this is
the thing we not to go down the rabbit hole, and yeah, that's why in Maryland, if you want to ask for a bacon, egg, and cheese or a sausage, egg, and cheese sandwich, they'll usually put it in
the microwave.
Which
is
it is astounding to me.
And also, I'll give you another example of this in New York City. How if you go order a sandwich, if you order cream cheese and bagel at a local at a deli in the Bronx,
yes,
it'll cost you $9, $10, whatever the cost is, because there's a sandwich regulation, sandwich tax. If you order a bagel slice with cream cheese on the side, $1.50.
There you go. Yes, yeah.
So so some restaurants are beginning to say, hey, order that pastrami and rye, but order it open face,
right? And
then there's no sandwich tax.
It's funny because weirdly enough, it was Congressman Brad Sherman of California.
Of course, Brad Sherman,
who Democrat from California.
Of course, it was Brad Sherman.
No, who had this. He was doing one of those DC's funniest people things.
Yes. Well, you said it as if the whole audience.
Oh, that's what I'm explaining.
Oh, our good old boy Brad.
Brad Sherman. And
Sherbert or Sherman?
Sherman.
I'm sorry.
Not Sherbert, not Billy Sherbert.
I like Sherbert.
Brad Sherman, yes. About California's regulation and tax on crackers versus bread, and whether matzah was going to be considered a cracker or bread for the purposes of taxation. And the California Department of Regulation, whatever it was, they wanted to tax it as a cracker. And Brad Sherman, as a state assemblyman, had to go and fight it. Said, no, matzah is the bread of affliction. It's not the cracker of affliction. All these are regulatory organs. Anyway, I didn't mean to go down this road. The point is,
yes,
I have direct costs, and they have indirect costs. And essentially, worst of all, is that the OMB wants to vastly overstate the benefits.
And that's Andrew, if we weren't running around talking about never Trump this or ESG that or Pride baseball over here, we actually could have substantive conversations about the regulatory cost, about the economy. We can't have a decent public discussion. Let me just say this:
we can't have a decent public discussion while we're splitting a decent sausage, egg, and cheese sandwich.
Right. But here, I thought about this today, Andrew, about the public debate, public discussion. I really do enjoy a debate. My wife and I sometimes, that book, Men, Mars, and Venus.
Men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
Because they kind of talk differently, different languages, whatever. And I discovered recently that my wife and I were talking about some issues. And she was really getting, not offended, but she was getting defensive. Yeah. And I couldn't understand why. And I finally said, I said, what's going on with you? Like, why are you getting excited with me? And she said, well, because you're because your mind is made up. I said, no, it's not. Not at all. I said, I'm talking to think. Yes. I'm making a case. I don't know if it's the best case. And also I like the tension of a discussion where there's an argument.
Sure. Absolutely.
My wife does not. But my point is that there's nothing wrong with a public discussion with some tension, with some argument. What is the phrase I used to use? A civil yet spirited debate.
Right. Well, now, it's like, Jerry, the last episode you and I did, where we had a spirited discussion about the legacy of Donald Trump, and you and I were in disagreement about this. It's funny because someone asked me that recently about the show generally, like, well, wait a minute, if you two are both conservative, how do you, what's interesting about the two of you having this discussion? I said, because we do disagree about things.
Because we argue all the time. Because the right, just like the left, isn't the monolith. There's different takes on issues. Plus, but let me say this, which is very interesting.
No, you're right.
I found interesting today, and we can move on to the baseball struggle sessions, Major League Baseball struggle sessions. But the Never Trump community, right? Ostensibly, Donald Trump was not worthy of the office of presidency,
right?
And and we can talk about this later in the show. But his attack on Kayleigh McEnany,
I
think demonstrates his lack of character and why people would believe he doesn't have the character for the presidency. I get that. But here's what I don't get. It's been 4, 5, 6, going on 7 years of the anti-Trump movement.
Right.
In any way have they elevated the public discourse?
Right.
In any way have they so Trump is wrong, But who is right?
Right, and it gets into the back and forth between Dan McLaughlin from the National Review and David French recently over David French's excoriation of Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, right? But the funny thing is about some of these Never Trumpers, and David French is really a disappointment because he claims to be a believer, a person of faith, but then he comes out and favors things and excuses things or makes excuses for things. And frankly, I think, and I'll say this, I think it's because he wants to be accepted by the DC. He doesn't live in DC, by the way, but I use this as a euphemism. The DC, intellectual circuit. He wants to be accepted, but the Never Trump movement has not made the debate clearer or better. It's made it worse.
Right. And one would hope, right, the Jonah Goldbergs of the world, right? Jonah Goldberg is someone who prior to the, folks losing their minds over Trump, is someone whose writing I respected greatly. Larry Hogan, again, someone who could have taken steps to elevate the debate. But I also want to sort of cast our mind across the aisle at something, because something caught my eye the other day. And I've mentioned this person on the air, a Hollywood producer named Robert Feivelin that I interviewed, who every once in a while will troll me on Twitter or attempt to engage with me. Like I posted something very nice on the passing of Tina Turner last week, and he got all in my grill on Twitter. He
doesn't like Tina Turner?
No, he loves Tina Turner. He said, but how dare you? How dare you say something nice? Tina Turner stood against everything that you stand for, which I don't think is necessarily true. But this is not my point. My point is that I watch because his stuff will occasionally pop up on my Twitter feed. And he had been involved in a debate with somebody and had gotten into essentially arguing with somebody online, and had gotten really nasty. And when I mean nasty, Jerry, I mean talking about people having their fingers in their own orifices, and it was really gross. And then he finally was demonstrated to have been wrong, and he tried to duck away and say, my bad. Which I appreciate people apologizing. But my point in all of this is, when you go down the road in a debate of engaging in not just personal invective, but like the nastiest kind of personal invective, it makes it impossible to have any kind of a rational discussion about things.
You're fat.
You're
listen, ugly. Your wife's a real
I got that. You have a bad haircut. Listen, I don't have a bad haircut. I really don't give a crap about my hair.
But you're right though. So again, I experience this on the radio all the time.
Yes,
I'll make a point about an issue, and instead of coming back and offering the other side of the issue, I get you're a Nazi.
Yes,
you hate women or some nonsense.
It's so funny because it popped up. I don't know how it popped up in my email. Something popped up, and it was an email from a listener, someone who had called you a Nazi, and I basically wasn't having any of it with that person, and told them so. I mean, but see, this is what leads us into the polarization.
By the way, whenever I get I don't engage with the trolls on Twitter, but when I get you miscreant, no good, son of a gun, Trumper, blah blah blah, I always say thanks for listening.
There you go. Thank you. Well, that's that's in the end, that's what you're supposed to do. By the way, I got a very nice email from listener E Ruby. Just the other day, and I'm hoping that anyway, it was very nice to get an email from one of the WBAL listeners out there. But Jerry, this is the point though, is that we have to be able to solve problems. We have serious problems. We do in America. We have very serious problems, and some of them we can't agree on what the problem is, and some of them we can't agree on what this is. But the bottom line is, we have to be able to talk to each other. And when we don't talk to each other, that's where you get into elderly pro-life activists being attacked outside of abortion.
You know what? It's funny. One of our WBAL listeners had emailed me about this. Let's just hit on this for a second.
Please.
So, we hear all the time from the mainstream media that the biggest threats to America are the right wing, the white nationalists, and all the rest of it.
President Biden said it at an historically black university. He said the greatest threat to America right now is the domestic terrorism of white supremacy.
Yeah, and this is very interesting because this truly is gaslighting. Because if you look at FBI numbers, crime stats, and all the rest of it. I mean, if you're living in Baltimore City or Chicago or Philadelphia, the biggest threat isn't a white nationalist. It's local gangs and local thieves.
Yes,
and also broadly, again, this elderly pro-life couple, yes. They weren't attacked by a Christian sect. They were attacked by progressives. Go back to the summer of 2020 and the consistent, the violence, the murder, the mayhem, remember the no-go zones in out west.
Seattle,
I mean,
Seattle.
Yeah, I mean, women were raped. There were all kinds of nonsense going on. All left wing, by the way.
The most significant aspect of the 2020-2021 era was January 6, 2021, when the reality is we had almost 10 months preceding that of relentless violence happening in American cities, including, I would add, an attempt to breach the fence at the White House,
of course,
by a group of people. I guess my point in sort of raising this, Jerry, is that it then sort of leads us into these other stories that are out there, which is, I want to go here, right, which is, because you underscored it. You have this attack on this elderly couple, the gaslighting of America on white supremacy. At the same time, you have a law professor or someone speaking to CUNY Law School and gaslighting people there.
A graduate who gave a vitriolic, anti-Semitic, anti-police, anti-white.
Right.
Is that even a thing? Can I say that? And you know what? Usually I see these headlines and it's clickbait. I went back, I listened to her speech.
Right.
I don't understand why she wasn't taken off the stage.
Right. And
it's
the City University of New York, but still you turn around and say, there are still boundaries of decency, even at a place like CUNY. But then you turn around, and this is just one law professor at the City University of New York. Then you turn around and you have Wes Moore giving his speech.
Well, let's stop there because it's something I've thought about the last 2 weeks. And that is Wes Moore is becoming a dangerous racial demagogue.
So Jerry and I at one point had talked about this show being, Wes Moore, the ChatGPT candidate.
Sure.
We may do that down the road, but
because listen, it is as if someone put him in a political lab and came out with this person of color, good looking, Johns Hopkins,
military background.
Oxford, military combat veteran, Wall Street, married, 2 beautiful kids. He's the whole package.
It is like an Aaron Sorkin created character.
Absolutely. Right. And here's the thing. He's a mile wide and an inch deep.
Yes.
He talks in bromides. He talks in cliches. He's like Norman Vincent Peale. He's, leave no one behind, and all these kind of cliches that he uses. However, he's dangerous.
Yeah.
Because he really is the I'm all about inclusivity and peace, but really there's a dark politics behind him that is extraordinarily racial.
Well, it is.
And when I say dangerous, because when Al Sharpton was at his peak, there were some who went Al's way, Al Sharpton.
Right.
But there were others who knew he was a hustler.
Right.
There were others who knew his criminal background. There were others who knew about the Tawana Brawley scandal.
Absolutely.
And so he never made it in the 80s, the 90s to be a mainstream civil rights leader.
Well,
now, MSNBC
he was always wearing tracksuits, so it was
right.
a whole other thing.
MSNBC has relaunched him as a pundit, that sort of thing. But he's past his prime.
Yes.
That's not Wes Moore.
Right.
Wes Moore is on paper a serious person, who is saying the most dangerous, unserious things. For example, the week that Ron DeSantis launches his political campaign, and don't tell me these Democrats aren't coordinated. He gives his speech about book banning.
Yes.
And again, no one in the state of Maryland, a reporter here, a journalist, a journal, but nationally, he's been on different national shows. No one will ask him the question, what book?
Right.
Specifically. Well, you know, the U.S. poet, her book was banned. No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
It's still in the library. It wasn't banned. It was taken from a preschool or elementary school section of the library and put into the middle school section of the library. There's not allowing for children to read age-appropriate books is not book banning.
Right. Yes.
But the left has redefined it, and the media doesn't question it. And this is dangerous because there is no, I want to say this, there is no book banning.
Right.
It's not happening. It's not happening anywhere. And there, in Florida, state taxpayer-funded universities and colleges, they're going to be making choices in curriculum. But just because one book is chosen, another book is not, isn't book banning.
Listen, remember, and again, so much of this was predicted in the early 90s by the movie PCU. And I hate to go back to that example, but the president of the university goes to two board of trustees members and says, listen, we need to figure out where we're going to put our gay and bisexual gender studies department, but either the football team or the math department has to go. I think it should be the math department. Right. This is we live in an era in which there are especially with our government funded entities, they have to make choices in terms of how they're going to use their resources. Maybe we should stick to the fundamentals here. But let me just focus on Wes Moore for a second and the danger here, because this is the danger.
Wes Moore, by the way, the governor of Maryland. Just so we
the governor of Maryland. This is the danger here of Orwellian doublespeak, which is saying one thing and couching in the language in a certain way when you're doing just the opposite, right? It's this idea of, oh no, we're not gonna, we're gonna all engage. It's essentially, it's a refinement of Joe Biden being the I'm gonna bring everybody together candidate, when in fact he and his team are doing just the opposite, doing whatever they can to drive each other apart.
Right.
Wes Moore is just the next flavor of that, where from he may mouth, the platitudes, the bromides, as Jerry says, of love and peace and togetherness, but then he's going to, enact policies that are going to serve to drive people further apart.
Yeah, it's funny. Wes Moore was on one of the national cable shows, and again, he was on there and he was talking about reproductive rights. And using all the euphemisms for abortion, reproductive rights, reproductive health, women's health, no one should get in between a doctor and her patient. All the cliches, all the bromides. And he was criticizing DeSantis as being anti-woman, anti-reproductive health, anti-reproductive rights. Now, but here's the difference. Ron DeSantis has made his position clear. He believes that at some point in pregnancy, after the heartbeat, I think it is, that's when you can start restricting abortions.
Sure.
Others think, well, maybe when the fetus can feel pain. Others believe that once there's viability outside the womb. My point is that there are lots of places within. Now, I'm pro-life. I think that it's a child, and I believe abortion is again, it's the killing of an innocent human being.
Yeah.
But however, we live in politics, and in my mind, less abortions is better than more abortions. Listen, so if Ron,
this gets into the entire theme of the show, which is going and finding compromise to find solutions, right? In a perfect world, there would be no abortions, but it is a less stinky way of doing it.
Right. And look, like during the 1840s and 1850s, there were very bad compromises. The Missouri Compromise, where states above this latitude, was it latitude?
Yes, latitude. Longitude goes
right. Well, states above this line would be free states. States below this line could be slave states. Again, it's horrifying to think about it, but it was a necessary given the times compromise. Well, today, governors like Ron DeSantis are making the tough decisions to say, look, there's a compelling interest for the state to interfere at some point because of the viability of the fetus, because of a heartbeat, because of pain, for any number of scientific, biological reasons, not faith-based reasons, biological and scientific reasons. So anyway, Ron DeSantis has shown himself on this. He's shown his cards. Wes Moore won't even answer a question.
Right.
He was asked,
worse, nobody will ask him the question.
Right. Well, he was asked once during the single debate for governor. He was asked about, would he support any restrictions on abortion? And his response was, again, the ready-made ChatGPT response was, well, that's abortion is healthcare. And he would not answer the question. So he's on this program criticizing another governor who's made hard choices and politically dangerous decisions. And the reporter won't even say, well, Mr. Governor, do you support abortion when the child's viable?
Right.
And then if he says no, I believe abortion up until the moment of birth, well, then he's an extremist.
Right.
If he says, I do support restrictions on abortion when the child's viable, well, then he's no different than Ron DeSantis, except they just draw the line differently.
Yes.
But you see, the journalist doesn't even put him in the position where he has to defend himself.
Well, right. This is the built-in benefit that your average Democrat candidate has in terms of running for office. The structural benefit of all this. It gets in the buffalo. What are you doing? Oh.
I wanted to do a ding there for you, but it didn't work.
Appreciate that. That's all right. We don't.
There it is.
That's so.
Ready? Did you hear it?
I didn't hear it. Oh, don't worry about it. Your mic may not have picked it up. These things happen. But I mean, that's the issue here, and then it gets into all of these other things with the but for the issue is in the end. One of the fundamental problems is we don't have an honest press, doing the work that needs to be done in terms of holding these candidates accountable. And when you have a candidate a politician who has the potential to be incredibly dangerous and divisive, right? I mean,
and no one is probing, asking, poking, trying to again. If I were the GOP, I would have a special Wes Moore project where on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, I'd remember when Bill. Ferguson. My goodness, who
are you? There are lots of Bills out there.
The Never Trumper. The Weekly Standard.
Oh, Bill Kristol.
Remember when Bill Kristol was the Dan Quayle's chief of staff?
Yes.
Remember what he did every day? Well, it was brilliant, and it started to organize, and the conservative movement kind of coalesced around it. He did a daily fax.
Yeah.
Every day he faxed something.
Yes.
That everyone could agree about. Well, the GOP now should have a daily, like a Wes Moore watch.
Sure.
Because he is next in line. He will be the next nominee.
Listen, and so
don't wait. Go after him now.
You're absolutely correct. You build a record now for when he runs for president, right? It's a situation in which we know this is going to happen down the road. So someone needs to take the steps today and do it, right? This is if there was still, and I should go and double check. I just don't have the energy to do it. But I'm gonna speculate. This is me speculating that the Change Maryland website and the Change Maryland organization is no more. This was the organization that Larry Hogan used to propel himself to the governorship back in 2013, 2014. Now, an organization like Change Maryland should be the ones doing this. I mean, it could be the Maryland Republican Party, but frankly, I think it would be preferred if it was somebody outside of the MDGOP that was sort of running this and doing a daily kind of briefing. You're right. Getting out to the activists in Maryland every day. Here is what the governor is doing. Send your letters, send your postcards, make your phone calls.
Here's his position on freedom of speech. Here's what he said in his Morehouse commencement. Here's his position on abortion. Here's what he said on CNN.
It's interesting, Jerry, because in the end, right, we know that in Maryland there is from a voter standpoint, an election standpoint, Democrats have a built-in structural advantage. outnumber Republicans 2-1. But I will dare say that if even a handful, a small percentage of those Republican voters were contacting the State House on a daily basis, contacting the governor's office on a daily basis, saying this stinks, you shouldn't do this, it might make the governor think twice about saying stupid things.
Or think that same thought, but think it differently. And that is, if the state GOP in any state where there's been a lot of pieces of late, City Journal, American Greatness, several other venues have done really interesting pieces on how to turn California red.
Yes.
And it won't happen because no one is doing the things necessary. And these aren't like big revolutionary changes. A couple things.
Yeah.
Big change never happens through big events.
Right.
Big change happens through gradual little changes.
Yes.
So in a state like California or Maryland or New Jersey, if you want to see big change, if you want to see more competitive races, you got to do the little things right. And that's the laziness of the Republican Party in these states.
Well,
they are not.
Some of it is laziness. I also think some of it is, it's the
lack of imagination.
It's the very dangerous combination of having folks who are very young and very inexperienced running these state political parties who don't know how to organize themselves out of a wet paper bag. By the way,
if I see one more thing on Facebook about, you woohoo, young Republicans in Annapolis at the bar,
yes,
what?
Yeah, it's not that. That's right. It's these are not social organizations. They can do social things, but they should. By the way, just because you mentioned New Jersey, I have to point out, and I don't know if it was intentional. I would like to think that it was. Washington Examiner, maybe when you're talking about Chris Christie getting in the 2024 presidential race, maybe you don't use the phrase another heavyweight is going to announce he's running for president next week.
That's awesome. Maybe that was on purpose.
I said, maybe that was on purpose. I love you guys at the Examiner. You just published my stuff. What was that, Jerry?
Maybe that was on purpose.
I think it was on purpose.
That was an intended pun intended.
Well, listen, it's like the time you had the former Miss Universe who jumped out of a window, and People magazine's headline was "Former Miss Universe made a tremendous impact."
No.
Yes.
That's horrible.
Absolutely true. I'm going to digress for a second.
Headless body found in topless bar.
Yes, when I was a kid, the Columbia School of Journalism used to do an annual review of the worst headlines ever.
Yeah.
And we had a neighbor who got me a couple of these books growing up, and they were awesome. It was Red Tape Holds Up New Bridge was, I think, the title of one of those books. But it's all very good. I mean, so we want to
know where the phrase red tape comes from?
Yeah, in fact, hold on, Jerry. Wait a minute. Hold on.
He's disappearing. There he is.
Yes, you see my knee brace and everything.
Yeah, what's on your finger?
Are we going to go through? Besides the fact that I've screwed up my knee, can I gross everybody out? So I don't know if you can see it, but I got a massive burn on my fingers. I was cooking the other day.
All right.
And the blister on this finger popped, and this one's still there. So Jerry, I was awarded when I was at NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Business.
Yes.
I was awarded, who gave this to me? This was from the Council for Excellence in Government. You can't see it. But you can see this little piece of red tape.
Yeah.
So I was awarded the Cutting Red Tape Award. I don't remember what year this was. This piece of twill tape circa 1870 originally wrapped Civil War records. To document, one had to cut the red tape. So I have a piece of actual red tape that was given to me
for soldiers to get their pensions and get their monies due. The paperwork was wrapped in red tape, red
twill. So I have a piece of it. It's the little award.
A little Andrew and Jerry Asave trivia right there.
Yes. Oh, by the way, I'm going to digress again. So, and folks, I'll remind us all. I'm about to go on vacation. My wife and I are taking a cruise, and I'm
with who, Andrew?
What?
With who?
Well, I mean,
with whom are you going?
Among me, you mean besides me and my wife and the 5,000 other guests that are going to be on the ship?
Yes.
My mother-in-law and father-in-law and my sister-in-law and her husband as well. But Jerry, the point is the schedule of activities. Have you ever done a big? I've never done a big cruise before.
Eric and I on our honeymoon, so a long time ago, we went on a cruise. I loved it. I had a blast.
So now all of this stuff is done on app. So you have an app that you download and it gives you the menus and all the activities and the excursions and things. So there is trivia contests in the various bars on the ship all throughout the day. I'm very excited.
How do you feel about everything going to app? Speaking of the Washington Examiner, we really are going on a tangent here, but
yes, but it's all right.
Tim Carney, Patrick Carney had a really good piece.
Oh, never mind. Who did he work for? Bob
Novak?
Bob Novak, not Bob Novak's son, as I thought when I was a
Alex
staffer. Yes. Yeah. Go ahead.
Alex Novak works at Regnery Publishing, as a matter of fact. Good guy.
Well, I thought Tim Carney was Bob Novak's son.
Yeah. No, he's not. Alex Novak is Bob's son. Anyway, long story short, Tim Carney did a piece on how in the old days, and again, Tim's younger than me, younger than you. But I guess the old days, our old days, my old days might have been late 80s, early 90s, maybe his or mid 90s, late 90s. But anyway, in the old days, and I could do this when I was a kid, we could go down to Yankee Stadium.
Right.
And buy bleacher seats when you're, 16, 17, whatever, 15. We can make our way to Yankee Stadium and buy seats, buy Cracker Jack soda and have an afternoon at the ballpark.
Yes.
Kids can't do that anymore.
No. Not because
everything is on the phone.
Well, Jerry, it's interesting.
And you just said your trip is the app. Well, what if you're someone who chooses not to have the iPhone?
Well, here's the thing. I know on ships,
or whatever,
they give stuff out on paper and you can see the activities.
All right, good.
They do that. They do that stuff there, but it's just now and sort of.
My father has never owned a smartphone.
All right. Well, that's interesting. But my parents have smartphones, but it's the same thing. They just use them for phone calls, and it's very confusing.
Well, that's how my mother does. Although my mom loves Pimple Popper.
This issue of is that a game? I thought it was a TV show.
The pimple. No, she actually watches this
the
dermatologist.
Dr. Pimple Popper. Yes,
it's a whole pimples. She loves it.
So, but this has its roots, Jerry. I mean, besides, I worked on the ticketing issue and the ticket resale issue.
Sure. I did too. Yes. I gave testimony in Tallahassee.
That's right. I'd forgotten you got into Tallahassee for that. So it actually has its roots when venues stopped accepting cash for tickets. Right. When you would have to use a credit card, and if people didn't have credit cards, they couldn't get tickets to things. No, I mean, listen,
I went to a concert. Robert Plant concert last summer. By the way, I think I'm seeing Robert Plant again this summer.
Yay!
And all to buy food or drink, it was non-cash.
So Jerry, by the way, I'll give you a piece of advice. If you have tickets to see Robert Plant, you should reach out to Robert Plant's publicist and try to get Robert Plant on your Sunday.
I'm going to do that.
So there you go.
Get Percy on the WBAL.
Yes, I think
Jerry Rogers show.
Yes.
Listen, we got to get going here. Let's talk about we talked about Donald Trump briefly.
Oh, yes,
about going after Kayleigh McEnany.
Yeah, let's talk about this.
Well, again, it's really. Here's the thing, and Andrew, you know me.
Yeah.
Well, I'll ask you. Let's see how well you know me. What, in my mind, what is the most important attribute a person can have?
Loyalty. Loyalty to your friend.
Loyalty.
Yes.
Loyalty. And so, people will say that Donald Trump, his best attribute is that he's loyal.
Right.
Well, no, he's not.
Yeah.
He's the opposite of loyal.
Well,
he goes after everyone. Kayleigh McEnany, like her or dislike her, believe in her politics or not, she was the best White House spokesperson since I'm not sure who before her. She defended the presidency. She defended the policies, could make the complex conversational. And why is he? And now he's attacking her. And by the way, in a social media post where he misspells milk toast.
Yes, I know. I thought that was hysterically funny. Oh, MILKTOAST. Yes, no, that's not how you spell. But the point is, in the end, right? It's a one-way street for Donald Trump.
Yes.
It's always about people remaining loyal to him. It's okay. I'll give you an example. And it's so Michael Steele and I we haven't had a conversation with each other in a very, very long time. But it is very rare, and I don't think I've ever really
said, Andrew, if you can hire him and pay him for something, I'm sure he'll talk to you.
Jerry says this, but I will not say a bad word about Michael Steele in the air, because Michael Steele was a very good friend of mine. And
he's a grifter. He abandoned his principles. He's intellectually dishonest. I'll say a lot of things.
You can say all sorts of things, Jerry, and it's just it's just one of those things. Michael is my friend, but that's the point, is that and I'm not going to go down that road of criticizing him in that way. The point is that people can criticize their friends. They can criticize people that they have worked for in the past.
Well, look, you could be friends with Michael Steele and disagree with his partnership,
right,
with the Lincoln Project.
100%. And
I do. Okay, yeah.
Or the fact that I think that Michael, shouldn't have signed on with MSNBC.
Yeah. Oh, look. I just said those things about Steele.
I disagree. Listen, I disagree with Michael. I disagree with Michael on things like the national popular vote, and Michael knows this.
Now, just for the record, I said those things about Michael Steele just to kind of make fun of Andrew a little bit.
Yes.
But however, what Andrew just said is that is my attitude towards Michael Steele. Right. I'm disappointed, and I disagree with his policy choices of late. And and again, I don't think we should be personal in our attacks.
It's interesting, because I was going to sort of engage in a bit of circular logic here, right? I mean, it's one of those things where I know Michael was and is still ardently pro-life. When Donald Trump got elected, Donald Trump was ardently pro-life. Now the question is, where is Donald Trump on abortion? I have no idea.
Well, he's
sorry, go ahead. But to make questions about that, and to essentially say, something, and listen, by the way, if Donald Trump understood anything about sort of the history of the modern Republican Party, he would understand we don't like to nominate people who have lost prior elections. It happens very rarely. In fact, I think in the last century, right? So since 1924, 1923, the one time Republicans have renominated a candidate that had lost and who hadn't been president before was Richard Nixon in 1968. We see how well that turned out in the end. But the reality is, right, have we ever renominated, Jerry, a president who had lost a re-election campaign? I don't think so.
No.
Yeah. So there's history here that Donald Trump apparently is not aware of. Now, maybe the time for history is to move on from that.
I spoke to someone over the weekend who politically I respect greatly this person's opinion. And he asked me, who do you like? And I said, look, I mean, I like them all. I like Kristi Noem. I like Tim Scott. I like Ron DeSantis. I said, if I had to choose right now, I'd choose Ron DeSantis because he pushes back against the woke disorder. And he also has policy chops. He actually has done governing both in the Congress, but more specifically and very effectively in Florida. So I think he's the guy. He has both the muscle and the brains.
Yes.
And this person's response was he thinks only Donald Trump could take on the media in a way that's necessary to win and push and to fight back. But my response to that was, well, you only got him for 4 years.
Yeah.
He's elected, Donald Trump, if he's elected. And, I don't see how a man who goes after Kayleigh McEnany
hold on, Jerry,
can win the general election.
Time out for a second. Jerry is about to make a very important point about
I better make it
the re-election of Donald Trump. Go ahead.
Well, he's immediately a lame duck president.
Right.
And again, right. And all my friends who watch, all my liberal friends who watch The West Wing, we know from Aaron Sorkin that really, if you're going to govern, it's going to be in that first 18 months of your presidency. So we're going to have Donald Trump 2.5 years as a lame duck.
Yes.
How do you build the party? How do you build momentum? How do you have a farm system of up and coming leaders when the top of your party literally is an 80-year-old 80-year-old who can't run for re-election.
Well, and yes, and an 80-year-old who is prone to outbursts and alienating the
and
folks
disloyalty and misspelling words and inviting a racist over his house for dinner.
Let's be really clear here, because again, this is not casting aspersions on anything that Donald Trump accomplished when he was president of the United States. But the point that Jerry is making here is that if we're going to have another go round at this, we should get somebody who can do the go round for 8 years and not just 4.
And also build and have someone with this. So whoever's president, if it's Nikki Haley or if it's Ron DeSantis, right? And ostensibly they're going to bring on a vice president who could be the heir apparent.
Right, of course.
Do you think, first of all, who's going to want to run with Donald Trump at this point?
Well, that's
give me. I know you off the top of your head. Give me a couple names.
Carrie Lake.
Okay, right. Yeah, not the future of the party.
That's
Lauren Boebert.
Yeah, Lauren Boebert.
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yes.
Matt Gaetz. None of those names, the 4 that we just named, none of them will ever be president of the United States. Right. None of them will build a party. And look, we can't be, and we started the show this way, we have to be inclusive as well. We have to have a broad party. It's a coalition of different interest groups. Carrie Lake can't do that.
Right.
I don't even know why Lauren Boebert's in the Congress. Her life is so out of order. I mean, she should not be a United States Congresswoman. Marjorie Taylor Greene keeps on saying the most insane things. Matt Gaetz, I think, could be a sinister anti-hero in a Marvel movie. I mean, these aren't serious characters.
Yes.
But you elect a 44-year-old Ron DeSantis.
Yes.
Ron DeSantis will be younger than you and me right now, our age right now. When he's done with the presidency after 8 years, he'll be younger than us.
Which is a scary and depressing thought, Jay.
But I mean, why not nominate the 44-year-old?
And by the way, Ron DeSantis could then go on and do other extraordinary things,
and he could be the anecdote to Barack Obama.
Yes, agreed. Yeah,
he could be. He could then go and build a movement.
Yes.
So this idea that it must be Trump makes no sense on any level.
But again, I want to underscore the point you're making, because I don't think it's one that most folks are thinking about. And frankly, I think there's probably a huge segment of the population that think that because Donald Trump didn't get reelected, that somehow
Donald Trump probably thinks he could run for 2 terms.
Yes, and
I was robbed the second time.
They very well try, and that's a whole nother debate that I just don't want to have. Right? I don't want to get into this. We know in the end that Ron DeSantis is going to get savaged by the leftist press. Whoever the Republican candidate is going to be savaged by the leftist press as worse than Donald Trump.
Yes.
But I would rather have someone who's going to have that debate without all of the baggage that Donald Trump brings to the table. Jerry.
Ron DeSantis hasn't been accused credibly of raping somebody.
No. Yes, that's
Now, by the way, I don't believe Donald Trump did that. But I do think Donald Trump's history is such that he probably behaved consistently inappropriately with women.
Yes. Yeah, I will.
The guy's got to go. The guy's got to go. Also, I'll end on this. I'll end on a substantive reason why Trump has to go. Because he gave us the lockdowns. He failed. His COVID policies were a colossal failure.
Let's also be really clear here. By the time we got to 2020, now I want to underscore this, and this is again where Ron DeSantis is very different than Donald Trump, and where having the experience of being in office and dealing with substantive issues. Again, one of the things that Donald Trump did really well when he came in is, in his surprise election of 2016, is that he appointed good people to good positions around him, and he had good people advising him. For the first, again, as Jerry said, it's about roughly 30 months in the end, 2.5 years. He had good people, but for those last 18 months, and then when the pandemic had hit, he had so made himself so toxic to those around him that people were leaving in droves. And what he was left with, by and large, with the exception of the folks at HHS, were people who were just giving him bad advice as to how to deal with these things. You get into the issue of who's going to run with Donald Trump going into 2024. It's also who would go into a Trump 2025 administration to do that work. Why would you go and do this? And so in the end, right, it's an issue of, so Jerry blames Trump solely, and I think there's merit to blaming Trump solely for how the pandemic was handled and the lockdowns were handled. But I also blame, and this gets into Trump, he also had horrible advisors around him who were not advising him well.
But here's the problem.
Hold on, from both the political and a policy perspective, and that falls on Donald Trump.
But here's the problem. There were governors who were doing the wrong thing. New York, New Jersey, we know who they are. But there were also governors, Iowa, Florida, Ron DeSantis, and elsewhere, Kristi Noem, who were doing the right thing.
Right.
So the states were a mixed bag of right things, wrong things. Now, and I give everyone the benefit of the doubt at first because we didn't know.
Right.
So even Andrew Cuomo at first.
Sure.
But the problem with the Andrew Cuomos and the Donald Trumps is that once they recognized that the policy in place was wrong, they never reconsidered and never repositioned. Donald Trump knew that we needed to open the economy. I know he knew,
and he was so flummoxed by the folks around him that he couldn't decide. But let me make this point. Let's remember that more people died from COVID when Joe Biden became president than died under Donald Trump. And if we're going to have a debate, if we're going to have a debate over the response to COVID and how things get screwed up, and the debate is going to be between Joe Biden and whoever the nominee is, I would rather have that debate be between someone who did things right, i.e. Ron DeSantis.
Very good point. Else, excellent point.
And Joe Biden and Donald
Trump. Because what Joe Biden did was essentially continue the Donald Trump lockdown strategy
in many ways. Yes.
Listen, Powerline blog. I don't mention them often. Powerline blog has a really good piece up today. A short blog, very short blog, maybe 300 words, 400 words, where it talks about how that they knew early that the lockdowns, the 2-week lockdown, they knew, Fauci knew, Birx knew, they all knew that it was a ruse.
Yeah.
They thought that that was the way to sell it to Trump.
Yeah.
It'll only be 2 weeks. And they believed that because Trump was Trump, he'd be so distracted, he'd be so flummoxed, he'd be so all over the place, disorganized, that once they get the 2-week lockdown, Birx and Fauci knew they could. And the biggest mistake of Donald Trump's the biggest mistake of his presidency was not confronting his expert leadership, Fauci in particular.
It again gets into the principal criticism at the beginning of the Trump presidency, right? Which is James Comey was able to take advantage of the chaos over at the White House and send over a couple of guys, and he completely undid the first year of the Trump presidency.
But here's the thing. We can't afford this again. We can't afford more chaos and mayhem.
No, absolutely true. So, Jerry, you're on Sunday. You're back on Sunday. You were off Memorial Day week.
We're off on Sunday. Yeah, my you know this. I think I mentioned before. My uncle Frank passed away.
Sorry to hear that.
And we had a nice send off for him. A wonderful memorial service. And then on Sunday, the day after his memorial service, my cousins and my aunt Denise came over. We had a nice family time. My sisters and a really, really nice family time. Yeah, but I'm back. I'm back on Sunday. This Sunday coming up. We didn't get much time to talk about it, but this Major League Baseball pride controversy.
Sorry about that.
No, but let me just say this going out, and maybe we'll talk about a reason to tune in for the next show.
Yeah.
June is Pride Month, so today's the 31st.
Yes.
Pride Month begins, and there's this controversy in Los Angeles, where they have re-invited a very hateful, anti-Catholic, anti-Christian organization That's very plain in their anti-Catholicism, anti-Christianity, but yet the Dodgers are inviting them in, giving them a Heroes Award. By the way, they're giving a Heroes Award to is his name Sam Brinton? The guy who stole the luggage?
Wait. I missed this story. What?
Yeah. My understanding is
how are they going to give him an award as he sits in a Virginia jail awaiting trial?
My understanding was, maybe they've changed, but my understanding was he was also listed as one of the heroes.
Wow, I can't imagine that's going to fly, Jerry.
But regardless,
listen, I have that much faith in humanity that I can't imagine that's going to fly.
I want to say this. I want to say that if Major League Baseball or if Target or Bud Light, if they want to have, again, more inclusivity and try different marketing techniques, and also, reach out to this community, that's not a bad thing in a pluralistic society. It takes all kinds.
Right.
Gay people like baseball.
Sure.
Christian people like baseball. Black people, white people, fat people, skinny people. We all like baseball. Baseball should be inclusive. The problem is that with these pride events, it's no longer about inclusivity. Yes. It really is about you must obey, you must celebrate.
You will be made to care.
Yeah. And yes. that's what's wrong about it. And really, I think ultimately it turns Pride and Pride Month into us versus them.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be this way.
Right. It gets down to, instead of it being inclusive, it is divisive.
It doesn't have to be this way. I mean, I remember last year where one of the major Pride parades disinvited LGBTQ police officers.
Right.
Because of the Black Lives Matter. I mean, so it's becoming this divisive, but here's the irony in it, in that it's no longer Pride Month. I think May has been pre-Pride Month.
Yes.
Because all of May, everyone's been talking about Pride Month in June.
I blame Justin Timberlake, Jerry. It's got to be May.
But the bottom line is that not everything has to be so politicized. I could believe in my Christian faith and what it says about sexuality, and still be a good citizen in a pluralistic society, and also a gay person can believe what they believe and live how they want to live, and also respect me, and we can live in a pluralistic. We're losing pluralism.
Listen, I can believe in a pluralistic society and then also believe that there's something fundamentally wrong with a bald guy with a mustache wearing a dress being handed over, access to nuclear secrets. I mean, that's, I mean, call me old fashioned there. Yeah. So Jerry, you're on.
Again, because I want to say, I'm sorry,
Jerry wanted to end the show 45 minutes.
I don't know, but because I do think this too is that there was this Toronto Blue Jays pitcher who came out and supported.
Same pitcher. Hold on, same pitcher who defended his wife in the popcorn incident on the plane, mind you.
All right, so but this pitcher supported the boycott against Target.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm not sure if baseball players should be boycotting. They represent a team, and what they do on social media reflects on the team. And I don't like the idea of boycotting. Period. I don't boycott. Yes. Have you ever heard me say I'm boycotting? I don't boycott, because if I had to boycott every company with whom I disagree, I'll be living in the Alaskan woods.
Yes.
So I'm not in.
I boycott, Jerry. I boycott companies that are. Well, actually, I was going to say I boycott companies that are inconvenient for me to get to, and even then, that's not true, because I still will do that. Go ahead.
But anyway,
guy, baseball player.
But he was criticized for an anti-gay, homophobic tweet.
Yes.
It's not homophobic to believe and support boycotting Target for going over the top with their pride display.
Right.
Okay. If Target had, like we started the program, if Target had a reasonable, inclusive celebration of the gay community, no one's going to complain.
But also, Jerry, here's the issue, and this is the point that I'm going to sort of my last point of the day.
All right, and I'll be quiet.
No, it is you can no longer have nuance. You're right. Just what we were talking about with abortion. Right. It's either X or Y. You either believe that life begins at conception, or you believe that someone can be aborted, a baby can be aborted as they're coming out of a woman's nether regions. It's either you're all in on everything having to do with the LGBTQIA agenda, or you are, you're homophobic, right? It's whereas the reality is differences. As I've said before, This is why I appreciate what the so-called TERFs, the trans exclusionary radical feminists, believe, because obviously they're feminists, but they don't believe that maybe that someone who was born a biological male should compete in women's sports. Right. There are nuances here. People can draw lines and have opinions on their own. We do not and should not live in a black and white society, whereas there are all kinds of levels within there. Jerry, Sunday.
So next week on Sunday, I'll be talking about this Major League Baseball struggle sessions issue. We'll be talking about Pride Month. I also want to talk about how ABC News is going to have a 2-hour special on why we should be paying reparations and using the 1619 Project as the mechanism to make the case. Again, up is down, down is up. We're going to set it all straight Sunday at Sunday's WBAL 7 to 10, the Jerry Rogers Show.
I want to wish a heartfelt congratulations to our colleagues at the Pacific Legal Foundation. They had an historic series of wins last Thursday in the Supreme Court. 2 cases decided in their favor and their client's favor within 5 minutes of each other. Go and check out my interview with Jeff McCoy. He's a staff attorney with PLF. That's up at the lunch hour with Federal Newswire.
It's also up at Real Clear Policy.
Thank you, Jerry, for that. Also up at Real Clear Policy. So go and check out Real Clear Policy. Find a link.
If you want to find his lunch hour, the lunch hour Federal Newswire interview easy and quick, go to
100%. Go to Real Clear Policy. There, Jerry. What do you want folks to do?
Find the truth. A lot of things. Find the truth. Plant your feet. Stay firm. God bless you all.
God bless you all. I will see you. We will see you in 2 weeks after I'm back from my cruise to Alaska. Have a great couple of weeks, everybody. Have fun and stay safe.